Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to another essential conversation at Wellbeings. And we're really glad to be here with you, and I'm really glad to be here with Leslie. Leslie is our. It's hard to describe Leslie really. She's many things. But she's unusual, and why is she unusual? Because she's a divorce lawyer, and she's not your typical divorce lawyer. She has heart. She is sassy. She comes in and she invites a conversation that normally wouldn't happen when someone steps into the room to start wanting to go through a divorce proceedings. So that's what we're going to explore today. Like, what's the essential things to start to think about and maybe even feel about before departing into that journey of divorce. So, Leslie, thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you for having me back, Nigel. It's always really a pleasure to have conversation with you. I feel that you bring something very special to the world of relationships and people. And I think that together we understand each other and come from the same place of love as opposed to hate and anger. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And you know, what's the first thing that we need to do when it comes to this thing called thinking about, feeling about divorce?
You know, relationships have an ebb and flow if they're going to last, a lifetime. And a lifetime for everyone is something different. Um, but when you're in a relationship with someone and you marry them, you've made a legal contract to be together, which entails more than just the emotional side of things. It entails your financial life too. And when the two people get together, it's romance and honeymoon phase and all fun. But ultimately, a lot of people get together and then family comes along and things change. Things change for whoever the primary caregiver is, whoever the primary earner is. And somewhere along the way, there's a communication gap. And it happens in every relationship. Happens in your friendships when things change. People grow at different rates. And sometimes you stay in your own head and you don't really reflect on the true reality of what's going on, but maybe you're feeling insecure and starting to feel that your partner is not respecting you the same way or treating you in the same way. But you fail to realize that you both changed and your circumstances have changed. And you're really the same two people, but you're growing. So instead of throwing in the towel, and this does not include any circumstances where there is abuse. If there's any abuse, then get out. So I just want to say that as a caveat here. We're not talking about that situation,
Mm-hmm.
but you really have to think about why you think getting divorced will make your life better. What is it that you're looking for outside your relationship that you can't get in your relationship? Or is it really there in your relationship, but you have to work for it? Some people don't want to put in the work. They think the fairy tale should continue from the day you've met. And yes, it is a fairy tale, but it evolves into a life tale as opposed into some imaginary, you know, fairy tale where there are no mishaps or, arguments or disagreements, or tragedies, sickness, things you have to overcome, life changes, job changes, moves, all kinds of things you can't anticipate. So you have to really reflect on why you're feeling this way and why you think divorce is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Grass is not greener on the other side.
Yeah, and Leslie, when you're over your years of working with people, and I want to, I'm really interested to, like, what do you think are some of the, I suppose, what we call the work? Like what's required to come out of the Walt Disney sort of, we all get programmed by culture, by
Mhm.
movies, by fantasy, by
Mhm.
how to cut through the. I think of I think of Shakespeare, and I think of the Pythagorean lover, and this was a guy who was in love with the idea of love, not the actual lived experience of the ordinary struggles of the ups and downs of a normal relationship. He was lost in the infatuation with with an ideal that wasn't real. So
Mhm.
what are the practical things that you think that's important that help them initially? Let's start off at the beginning. Like, what's the work that's required? What's the work you've experienced also in your 2 decades old marriage? What is it that's required?
Well, I always encourage people to maybe write it down so that they can reflect on what's really going on in their head. Because, once you say that horrible thing or put that word out there or cast that stone, you can't get it back. And sometimes you say something that could cut so deep to the other side, the other person in your relationship, that they can't even believe you would say something like that. But the truth is, it's how you're feeling about yourself. So the work comes in self inventory and really asking yourself, what has changed with me first? Have I changed careers? Have I become a parent? Have I found a new hobby? Do I now get up at 5 instead of 7? Do we not have coffee together because I need to fit an hour of working out in, where I used to have coffee with my mate in the morning? Does he stay up late? Do I go to bed early? Like, you have to first figure out what the changes are. And some of them are circumstance, and some of them are just growth changes. If you've met and you're in your younger 20s and still in school and graduating, well, there's going to be a lot of change ahead of you because you're going to school for some sort of career or licensure. So when that comes, if you're married to somebody, now you're in a new role and now your life is automatically different. And how do you deal with that? So I think that the work comes first from within, and write it down. You can rip it up later. You don't have to save it for someone to find it. But I find it's a very effective tool if you write down how I am now, how was I then? What's changed? How do I feel about that change? Do I feel positive about that change? Because if you're feeling good about it, then that's something you may have to talk to your partner about. You know, most change is positive. People are afraid to change because they like the familiar, but if you don't let go of that dead skin, it just piles on, and then you kind of get trapped, in that
Yeah,
rust.
it's so important. I love that. I love the taking accountability. Doing that personal inventory and really starting to get to know yourself. Starting to pause from the being a wife or a husband, being a mother or a father, being a business owner, where you pause and say, okay, let me come home for a minute. Let me connect to this ordinary me, and let's see how I'm feeling. Let's see, like, how am I, and then being able to have that interest in the self, then being able to be interested in the other. And I love the words that you were using, like change, because I was with a couple the other day doing couples work, and one of the couples would finish the sentences of the other person or attempt to, because they never want they know like we get complacent in relationships sometimes where we don't get to be curious and interested in the emerging, changing other in the goddamn relationship. And then, you're estranged from one another, and often estranged from yourselves. And acknowledging where you're changing, and to explore that, and to be interested in our partners, to be deeply interested. And some of us don't know how to do that because we never had that interest in our childhood. We never had people who were interested in our unique internal landscape. We never had people who were wanting to accompany us in our feelings and emotions. And we had parents who were good parents, but they may have been authoritarian. They may have been
Mhm.
able to be great providers, but they may not have been emotionally mature, or they may not have been very, very present. So we learn these skills in our childhood, but the secret is we all got to grow up sometime. And sometimes we
Right.
need space and places to go to do that. So yeah, communicating is, I think, the key, Leslie. And I'm thinking, just of course, this is going to be jumbled because there's so much to it. But have you had ever an experience? Don't mention any names, but any experiences with somebody coming in and realizing about the importance of that communication with their partner, and it make a difference at that critical, vulnerable stage where someone's thinking of going down that road, and there's a moment where they pause and they communicate. And what have you seen happening just with something as what may feel as simple as that?
Well, I see it all the time. People have built up these feelings because they haven't communicated with their partner. So, they're in their own head with their own thoughts, with their own stinking thinking, so to speak. And they are realizing at a certain point that they're not communicating how they're feeling with their partner, but rather it's kept so deep inside that they can't find their way to get to that path because they're afraid. There's a fear now. Well, what if my partner doesn't like what I'm thinking? What if my partner doesn't like who I'm becoming or want to be? Or maybe my partner won't take this journey with me on this, new path. But what people fail to realize is if you're feeling that way, your partner is probably feeling that way too, to some degree. We're not so unique when we're with each other so long. You do find that you're on a same page or on a same path. And that doesn't mean you don't have your own dreams or goals or desires, because you do. But having a teammate, a partner that you can do it with, that's the key element. Is this the person you want to take with you? And do they want to go with you on that ride? And I think 9 times out of 10, they do. But people get so caught up in pointing a finger or blaming or afraid of their partner saying, no, I don't really want to do that. Well, no doesn't mean I don't love you. Just means no. Maybe they're not interested in hiking mountains, or something like that. But maybe they want to do something else with you,
Yeah.
So I find that people build, 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 but they'll talk to their friends about it. They'll talk to their siblings about it, but they don't talk to their spouse about it or their partner. They leave them out of the conversation, and they think somehow, they're a mind reader and they should know what you're thinking. And why don't you know what I'm thinking? And that's really all about who you are, because
Yeah.
you're afraid to tell them what you're actually thinking and feeling. And your feelings are your feelings.
Yeah.
Facts are facts, but feelings are feelings. So, before you get to that point, share with your partner. What is the worst thing someone could say? No, I don't agree with you. Okay, well, we have disagreements all the time. That is I say it again, very different than someone saying, no, I don't love you.
This is the thing that I think is very, very powerful that you're touching on here, Leslie. And it's this idea of where I can love you and I can be close with you and I can have this felt sense of togetherness with you, but I can also be separate and I also can be individuated. And in family structures when we're young, it's this often this belief that for you to love, you either disappear and conform to some ideal, or there's a way where you just rebel and there's no closeness. But there's they lose the idea that you can have closeness and it's not dependent on that you have to agree on everything. And that's the tricky bit that people have to realize. It's okay to have that. No, it's okay to, yeah, your partner likes drumming and you like doing paper mache as a hobby. You don't have to be joined at the hip, because that joining at the hip is a sort of codependence, a sort of
Mm-hmm.
merging with one another, which is so self-destructive within a relationship as well. So the idea of codependency is I love you and I never let you go, and you can't, and you have, and we all have to do the same thing, and we, but a healthier relationship as I love you and I set you free to be you, totally you, not under my control and not under my fear of communicating my struggles, my ups, my downs. And, you know, I had a very beautiful thing that happened today. And I think this is another thing back to what we initially started to talk about, Leslie. And I have my clients I could mention, but I'll be vulnerable and I'll just talk about myself here. I was running group from 4 a.m. this morning and we were busy. It was a busy day. And I finished my work day and I noticed I could have rested. I could have, went for a run. I could have done a thousand things for myself, which I wanted to do. And I noticed, my partner wasn't, there was something up. And I took it, I felt that. And I made an interest to like sit with her. And she says, I'm fine. And then I said, well, let's just sit here for a while. And then she started to feel, and she was sharing that she had a bad day. And then we had this connection where she was able to be vulnerable and tell me about what it was. And taking that interest, taking that time, putting in that work. I don't need a medal for it. That's just part of what the job is, to be a good enough husband, in my opinion, to take interest, even whenever you're tired or you're, and some days I don't, but on the days that I do, it's important for us to take an interest and also to be individuated within the relationship. And
So I just want to comment here that your partner, your wife, recognizes how hard you work. And although she had a bad day, she wasn't just going to come forth and tell you that after you've been working for so many hours. And the fact that you took that time to sit down with her, she knew it was okay then
yeah,
to share. Because otherwise, if you had gone to rest or do whatever it is you wanted to, she would have stuffed that down and it would have come out in a different sense, because she's also caring of you and respectful of you and your time. But if you do that enough, then all that stuffing down doesn't help. So I mean, it's really, look at how wonderful you know your own partner. You know something's up, and you know that was the moment not to go off and take the nap or go for the walk or whatever it is, but you really had to pay attention to your relationship. And I feel so many people, they don't miss the cues, but they ignore them. They ignore them either because they don't want to know what's going on, or they could be a little selfish. People do become selfish in relationships depending on how the relationship has grown and how each partner has treated the other. And that's what I mean about not being a mind reader. If one partner changes the rules because they feel differently about something, well, you have to tell your partner you've changed your rules or they won't know that. And then they will keep acting the same way because they don't know something's changed. And then the other partner gets extremely frustrated and angry because they think, well, he should know that or she should know that. And then that develops over time into anger, frustration, disappointment. And then people say, well, I'm just going to get a divorce because
yeah,
they've skipped all the other meaningful steps. Because work in a relationship is work. You have to be kind to yourself, kind to your partner, considerate. You have to think about how you want to express how you're feeling, because, yeah, you are concerned how your partner might feel about certain things. But in the end, if you're truly a team and together, you both get on each other's pages and you make it work and you figure it out.
yeah. You put in the work, and like I had had a couple of people coming this week who were at a crossroads of thinking about divorce, and both parties, which most people ask, and they may also ask you this question, is when do you know the time is right to leave? When do you know when to stay and when to leave? And it's a little bit similar to some of the content that we've been talking about, but it's about getting to know yourself, to come out of the child orientation of reacting or wanting to leave because there's something feels uncomfortable, and to move into an adult orientation internally where you can get to know yourself, get to know the part that's inflamed, get to know the part that's accumulated over time, get into to have responsibility for your part in it. It's
Right.
because it's not a, yes, if there's violence or if, and even with infidelity, it's not a black and white case either, because maybe
No.
this, because that's what showed up this week. There was a reason why the man was cheating, because he didn't speak up, but then there was a big void in the relationship where there was no connection for almost a decade. So there's a real, so when do you leave? Well, when you show up to meet yourself, then in time you can leave with integrity, because you'll have looked at what's there, try to own and take responsibility for the parts that's yours,
Sure.
and grow a little bit in the process. But many people skip that, do the divorce, go into another relationship, and they have to end up meeting the same thing again.
Sure. Sure. Of course. Knowing when to leave, I think that you really know when to leave if you've done the self work, if you've looked at your life in whole and where you're headed, and without hate and anger, because you don't have to hate somebody to leave. You could still love your former spouse. There are people that do, especially if you have children together. You love them. You sometimes just grow apart, period. There are people that, whatever their reasons, have awakenings and all they want to do is travel and see the world. And then there are others where their families are large and it's not that important to them to see the world. They just want to see their family and be with their family. And I kind of use this a lot, this example, because if you can't blend those together, then you might struggle, you know? Yes, is it like, and this is taking this one step further, isn't it wonderful to go see new and exciting places with the person you love? Of course. But isn't it equally gratifying if you have a loving family that you can visit in different places, that you can go and spend time with them? Because, once time is gone, it's behind you. So depending on where you are in life, and if you have less days ahead of you than behind you, you have to weigh what you want those days to be filled with. And if you're on such different pages or in such different chapters of a book, maybe then it is time to separate. Does that mean you have to have a knockdown, drag out divorce? No. Just maybe you need to just love each other as friends, or the parent of your child, but maybe you need to move on to live the life you want to continue living for the rest of your life. If you and your partner can't find a way to do it together.
Yeah,
Um,
Leslie, this is so important. This, you know, you know, and we'll get to that in a minute. I think there's so much more before we get to this place. But let me name something that you're sharing that I think is important, and that's, when I come from Ireland, and there's a lot of Catholicism there, and
mhm.
in the Catholic Church, generally there's old school frowned upon divorce,
Yeah.
and they stay in relationships and they're killing each other, and there was nothing left in the relationship except the sort of intimacy that was caused by negativity and spitefulness and bitterness, that they were bonded in that sort of dynamic that affected and infected everyone around them. And if for some reason they get support and they realize that it's actually healthier for both of them to separate, that whether they're bitter or angry or upset, then if anybody's divorcing and they're wanting to, where they're angry at the person and they're in that real victim place, or in that real place where they want to take vengeance and they want to hurt the partner,
Mhm.
therapy, support, because you're driving drunk, you're in,
Yeah.
you're, don't drink and drive because you're flooded with the emotional states, and you don't think clearly, and you're creating suffering for yourself and for the people around you.
Sure.
And then nobody wins in that situation. So, but to that stage, so there was something I wrote down here that I was interested in, and it's you know, it's there's a couple of them here, but when, in your opinion, working with clients, do you often find, of course, there's an accumulation of things that can, which I call stamp collecting. You stamp, and then you trade it in for a divorce or a tantrum or an internal depression. But do you ever find that there's a defining moment where something that shouldn't have happened, or something that should have happened that didn't happen, that caused the divorce for people? Is there, when they're reflecting back, do you find that sometimes it's one thing that they're harboring that can really be either the straw that broke the camel's back, or which would be more accumulative, or just something that they were never able to forgive, or never able to really express? Because I see that sometimes with my clients, is they share, well, this happened, and because that happened, I can never trust them again, or I can never love them again. Or I'm just curious about, do you see that there's defining moments that from the history? Yeah.
Several. So for some, if you and your partner are in a certain situation and you've wanted out, but for some reason your partner tells you it's really not a good time, and they're a good provider and they're kind to you and kind to your children, but really it's more like a financial thing, the defining moment is when you find that the partner was lying. Like the knock on the door with foreclosure papers on a house, because the partner who said this is not a good time for divorce really didn't fill you in on the fact that, they didn't get the promotion, they didn't get the raise, but yet your life stayed the same. Travel, clothing, nothing changed. There was no pulling back or cutting back. And then all of a sudden the holidays roll around, you have children, you get a knock on the door and it's foreclosure papers on your house. That's a defining moment. But I will say, in that particular situation, the wife who really wanted out went back to school during the time her husband was telling her it's not a good time for divorce. So she re-educated herself. So because I'm not really sure they would have divorced had that knock on the door not had happened. Now, if that had not happened, she may have just stayed. They still travel together, with their kids, things like that. So that was a defining moment there, that lie that he could not share because of his need to control, that said, I've had enough. And because she was re-educated and had a new career, she was not afraid financially to take that next step.
That's wonderful that you used the word afraid there, because for me, I see what happened, and that might have been the right thing to happen for that relationship. But then here's a man who's feeling scared to share his insecurities to his partner. And what would have happened if he was allowing himself to share the struggles and the pain and the suffering of a lifetime of doing that? Because that's not a one-time gig.
Right.
So that embellishment, those tell us about the poverty that's inside, and the needing to be more to compensate that. And that works for a while when things go well, but when they don't go well and the displaying falls away, and then everybody, who's listening out there, then it's time to reveal, it's time to say, hey, and to take the courage to do that. So if I had met that couple, and if the husband was open, then the work I would have been doing with him before he would leave that relationship or enter into divorce would be to say, okay, well, I've got nothing to lose here. I'm losing everything anyway. Or, let me get to know myself. Let me get to know that little boy who feels less than, who needs to be more than. And what would it be like to share that with my partner, and let her see me in that state, and let him get re-educated in coming back to himself. That may never have worked, but that's just what comes to mind, where both of them needed to explore some parts of themselves, and it might have never made a difference, but he would have grown in that experience and really would have had to look at, wow, this is really destructive, to be able to compensate in the way that you're compensating.
You know, I often ask clients if they've been to therapy, either for themselves to get the tools that they need to cope within their relationship and what's happening, or together. Um, People are often very resistant to therapy and are afraid, because you have to work on yourself in therapy and you have to look in the mirror. And people think, well, I'm telling a stranger, my issues and my problems. By the way, that stranger's heard it all. You're not that unique. But what that stranger can do for you is be neutral and give you tools that you are not equipped with or that you don't have. We all have a certain set of tools in our toolbox in life based on experience, career, whatever has circumstance that we can share to help others with. But then there are others who are trained to give better tools and recognize certain unique characteristics in others that are struggling, that we can't give those tools to. So when couples haven't exhausted all of that, then there's something else at work, why someone wants to divorce and move on. And sometimes it's for the best thing, and sometimes it's not, you know.
I'm curious as well, Leslie. This is something I see. In America, I don't know what the statistics are in America for divorce. Maybe it's 45, 55%. I'm not. Do you know what the stats are on that?
Well, was like 50% for a long time and then higher, but now things seem to have leveled off, and it seems that people are more committed and marrying in a different way. I think the younger set, that we call the millennial set, they're very cautious about marriage. And it's because they're also a product of the most divorces and other things.
And this is what I wanted to get to, because how many of your clients had experiences of being in divorced families as children?
Yes.
Because we can mimic
struggle.
Yeah, in the family, the script of the family might be, and again, I just want to say, sometimes it's really healthy to end a relationship, but also sometimes when we're young and we see that modeled, it's also can be something that in a therapeutic world, you can help to not let that be the thing that
break the cycle.
Exactly, or to at least help you understand what's actually happening in those, an old therapist worked with me one time, and we were supervising on a case I was doing, and it was like to stop being a lover of leaving in your life.
That's really, I like that. Stop being a lover of leaving.
Yeah,
it's running away.
Yeah, and sometimes we have to go the other way sometimes because it's needed. But if that's habitual, if you were to look at your history, where else have I run away from? Work, commitments, sort of responsibilities, never really moving forward in life. Just there's so many things that if you come from a family where divorce has been, they get that support, get that help, or at least start to talk about it and wonder, is this something that the script that I'm continuing in my life, not just in divorcing, but the way in which I'm leaving and moving away from the very thing that could feed you, which is love, commitment, companionship, being deeply accompanied. I think there's no other medicine in the world when you can put the work in to have somebody there with you, where they can sit with you in the darkness and celebrate you when you're in the light.
Yes. And that's not easy either, celebrating in the light.
It's the same thing, it's like to bear that without letting our little kid feeling insecure and jealous, and like that's the codependency. Codependent people don't let anybody else set the other partner get too celebratory. It feels intimidating. Then it can be competitive. There's just so many dynamics. So if anybody's listening who is married and is having struggles, there is help. Of course, therapy. You can reach out here. You can, if you're thinking about wanting to have a divorce, you can hook up and check in with Leslie and her contact details here. But the whole thing is that don't rush. Take your time. Get support. Get another mind to be
Yeah.
able to sit with yours and see if yours can expand or get shaped by professionals who understand this world, but then also see you also as a unique case where there's your history, there's things that happened, traumas that happened, things that happened that should have happened, things that happened that didn't happen that should have happened, all these different things that accumulate to why, and then the people we attract into relationship as well, and sometimes the mirrors of our partners and how they show us parts of ourselves that we don't like to see sometimes, and
Yeah,
um,
sure.
so
And as I say, that just helps you grow, when you see those parts, and then it helps you recognize when you're acting that way in other situations, and if you have a loving, caring partner, they don't come at you with meanness or negativeness. They kind of just find their way of pointing things out to you that works in your particular relationship. I do want to say that um, when people do come to me and are thinking about a divorce, I always ask them to sit quietly and think about what their life is going to look like when they are not with their partner, both their emotional life, their social life, and their financial life. Those three things, you know, um, a lot of people don't divorce because they're not financially independent. Some people are not socially independent or emotionally. But if you're unhappy and want to make a change, you got to make the change within you first. If you're not earning enough because you do want to be on your own, well, then get a better job, find a different way, take another path. It may not happen overnight, but walk down that road. You'll feel good doing it. If you feel that you've been closed off from the world, whether it's because of parenthood, COVID, or whatever, pick up that old hobby or find a new one. Make a new friend. Not a romantic friend, but like a social friend. Make new friends, go to the gym, whatever it is that floats your boat. And emotionally, you got to check in with yourself and really not point fingers at yourself or anyone else, but try and really look at the world the way it is. I know people that they never want to rock the boat in the family. They want everyone to think that their family is a certain way when there are things out there that would be otherwise. And maybe they're not the best things, but that doesn't make those people bad people. But why wouldn't you want the truth to be known? I mean, there are some truths that are better left unsaid. We don't want to harm our children by bashing our partners or saying things we shouldn't, but I'm not really talking about that. They could be the
yeah,
simplest of things, you know,
exactly. And
could be that, your father wasn't truly that wealthy, you didn't know that, we gave you everything, but you didn't really know, and people want to carry that on forever. So now your kids have this need to live up to that expectation. Not that you know that you're putting that on them. And I know this is a slight deviation, but it's complex. And I think that if you're going to move on, make sure you do it from a position of strength and not weakness, and love and not fear.
yeah, sober thinking, and getting the help to help you think
Yeah.
soberly and such a massive decision that also to think about. I think this is a good enough word. Maybe it's not the right word, but like collateral damage for the children that are
Yes,
around.
it's the right word, because really, you know, nobody wins when a family breaks up.
And
Nobody.
I think this is good to say here because I often hear this, like for the ones who do have that question, and it's like sometimes there is collateral damage if you stay, and there's collateral damage if you leave. And what and it's about, yeah, like just really getting sober in your thinking and clear and grounded to know which is the best option for yourself and for the people you love and care for, and to
Well,
really acknowledge the reality of, because so often, and this is the thing that divorce is bad enough, but it's then when one of the partners in the marriage then divorces the children, where they pull away, and sometimes there's triangulation that happens in families where they side with one side, and someone's left always on the outside, and then the children feel that sort of distance and pull away. Where the children, I have lots of kids that come through where they have to dealing with the confusion around mom or dad divorcing them as well because of the anger, the pain, the suffering, and yet really getting sober on the reality and then how to do it differently with your kids, to be able to make sure there's support, maybe to enter into family therapy, to be able to see a psychotherapist, a family systems therapist, to be able to allow yourself to do it as good as you can, not to stop them from having feelings, but to have supports there to safeguard them in some way.
When it comes to children, if your children are really young and you divorce and you are parents to your children, then you treat each other with respect and you treat each other as best friends who are raising a child, and that child will feel loved from both sides. If you divorce when your child's really young and you and your spouse are constantly fighting with each other, negative, nasty, mean about maybe someone new in the other person's life, your young child's going to be resentful to both of you. Neither of you will win, and they will be harmed. They will need therapy to undo that because they will never understand how mom and dad could hate each other. Not when they're young. The only way they get it is if it becomes normal to them if mom and dad live nearby, they live in two different houses, but you might still have Sunday night dinner together for your child. You might still have, homework together on a Monday. You find a way to include each other in your new life circumstances so that the child feels loved from both sides, engaged and wanted. So when you stay together on the other side, the flip side, for your children until they're much older, you do a different type of damage. Now their life is a lie. It's a lie. And it's confusing. I find that children who are high school to college and their parents split have a very difficult time with relationships because they look at their parents and now they don't know what is real and what isn't. And, it wasn't the big fight that they heard or this and that. Everyone has bickering, but they really have a different type of consequence and collateral damage, as you would say, when they're older. Because think about that. If your parents are together and now you're 22, 3, and now they're divorcing, that kind of shakes your whole foundation of what you might have thought a marriage is. And then you say to yourself, what am I going to get married for? I'm going to be with someone 22 years and it's going to be over. So I tend to think,
support, and there needs to be education, and there needs to be time.
Sure.
Where people take interest in the kids' interior, where they provide spaces where professionals can accompany them if they are not able to do that. So that, that it is confusion, and I like, I've had 20-year-olds feeling like duped and like conned.
Mm-hmm.
But really confused, and often one of the parents is the bad cop and the other one is the good cop.
Yeah, sure. By that age, absolute 100%.
It's just it can really shape their relationships and their relationship with themselves. And
well, they have no trust.
That's one of the things that they could have, or they could be. So there's loads of adaptations that children go through. When these things happen. And the thing here for everybody who's listening, the main things, there's so much stuff here, and we're going to keep coming in every month to kind of explore this topic in deeper and deeper detail. But like communication, like if you're sitting on the crossroads of wanting to or thinking about having a divorce, then really think about what is it that's going wrong, and taking and looking at it internally, looking at where have you took your eye off the wheel, where have you colluded in not expressing how you feel, where have you harbored resentments and pain and suffering, and then to maybe bring that conversation to your beloved, and who may not feel like your beloved, but where you bring it towards your partner.
Right.
That's what I would call my partner, and then to really be to look and get support, because the reality is that the way we think about things sometimes is not how things are, and we, just because we talk our thoughts doesn't mean that they're real or that they're true. That you can have other places where you can get just this neutral lens that can give you objective truths based on what you're saying, that can be grounding and clarifying, and at the same time hold space for your heart to ache in a way that will need to, where then there's a possibility to share that with your partner, and the possibility of where you used to start all over again, and build intimacy, which often is what's missing in relationships. And
sure.
I don't mean intimacy in the bedroom, but intimacy per se, in communication.
Yes, of course.
Vulnerability, all that good stuff.
Yeah, some people like to stay in their own thoughts because it's safer.
Yeah, we call that the isolated mind.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because they learned in their childhood there was nobody interested in them, so they would be they just would hang out in like a ping pong machine and bounce beliefs and ideals to live up to based on their environment. So yeah, like we all do that sometimes. I have clients who speak to themselves because they've isolated themselves from the world, and so common. So don't isolate, don't react, reach out for support. If you're really contemplating divorce, please reach out to Leslie and her team, and you can get guided back to yourself. We'll be back in here next month again talking about this good stuff. And the main thing here, and you'll hear it from me every week or when I'm sharing, is that we need people. We need people to do this thing called life. We need people to be able to lean up against, to share, to feel, to grieve. And when we're making these big life decisions, we have to think clearly and know that the lay of the land in the future, and to not have a fantasy about that either. And get some deep teaspoonfuls of grounded reality that I think you dish out a lot to your clients when they come in the door. I'm so happy that any client chooses you, Leslie, because it's such a wonderful thing that in the business of divorce, people can get lost and say, "Oh, here's another client. I can make a few bucks here, and come on in and get divorced." But there's something wonderful that you have a heart and a strong, steadied hand and a mind that's open to meet them in a way where you're inviting them to think about it, to feel about it, to get help about it, and to maybe not do it. And like that's so powerful. And I call it integrity. It's like
Thank you.
It should be there everywhere, where it's whenever
unfortunately it's not, but we can strive for that.
Like I was talking to a client today, and they had a health challenge, like a lump in their bodies, and they went to see a specialist who just looked at the lump and said, okay, well, we need to do a biopsy or whatever. But so that was a specialist who was getting. But what helps that client is whenever I had a trauma when I was younger in that particular area. And so when you look at the emotional part, you just don't look at things through one lens. Bathe it and wrap it in some relational or emotional or sort of thinking about our thinking. It's so important not to just look at it in that way, which many divorce lawyers do. It's like, no, come on in. Let's hop on the merry-go-round.
It's a job. It's for a lot. It's just, this is my job, and if you want it, I'm going to give you the result you want. Yeah,
and it feels for you, Leslie, now correct me if I'm wrong, I'm being a bit presumptuous here. It feels like it's a vocation for you.
I'd say you're right. I mean, I have a lot of people who walk through my door. They don't like what I say or how I say it. I'm very direct. Um, I give you about 15 minutes on the pity pot and kick you off and say, well, let's try and build a new life. Because if we're going to take this path, you're going to really need some help to get there.
Yeah.
And, if I'm not your cup of tea, there are many other flavors out there that you can try. I like to think that I at least leave my clients feeling better and more hopeful about life and the future. And there is a possibility to maintain their relationship and back out of this path that they thought they were going to walk down. Um, I don't look at it as losing a client. Those are the very people who send me clients because I just say it the way I think or feel. And when I think something's wrong, I don't like to be part of it.
Yeah, you're colluding with the wounding, or yeah, that's beautiful. I
Don't
love that.
like to be part of it. So I'm involved in some cases now they're really all about money. And, it doesn't matter what you say or do to the client, and you can't drill through the wood to the other side. It's sad. It's really sad. So I try to do the best to protect my client and just help them see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and they're going to get there, and I'm going to hold their hand if I have to cross that bridge.
Yeah, so anybody listening, like if you do need support, please reach out to Leslie. If there's emotional and relational, psychological, or just ordinary heartfelt support, please reach out to Wellbeings or send me a message here on my Facebook or on the Instagram. But thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Leslie, for being with us again. And we'll all see Leslie again pretty soon. So, guys, thank you. If you liked today, if you got impact, if you feel it could help somebody, please share it within your contacts. Anybody who's in a struggle at the moment, where you think it might give them some help or find a new North Star whenever they're feeling that they're lost out at sea with this swamp of decision making that would happen at this time. So please, if you did enjoy it, hit it a little like, subscribe, or share it. And thank you for taking the time to check in. And Leslie, see you again really soon.
See you again soon, Nigel. Thanks so much. Take care.
You too.